When we were young, I'm speaking about 1937, 38, 39, 40, much of our time was spent at the harbour, maybe working like these two boys, Willie Campbell and Georgie Reid, delivering groceries to stores, to a boat, maybe hanging around waiting till the market time, or trying to get a guy rope so that you could pull the fish in. Not terribly easy, and sometimes you had the ignominy of a man needing to help you to pull it in. But much of our time was spent catching gerrichs down at the slippy, and this was a sort of typical afternoon scene as we waited for the boats to come in. I wasn't very good at it, I don't think, or maybe I lacked commitment, but I'd quite likely be the boy standing back there with the white sand shoes on, coaty perkies they were called, gutta-perka. Every so often we would go round to the South Pier, and here's a boy casting out into the middle. We always hoped that mackerel would come in, or maybe conger eels would come. I never caught either mackerel or conger eels there. But on the 1st of August of 1939, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was sitting on that pole, gazing out the other direction, gazing out to sea, and watching a couple of aeroplanes. We knew about aeroplanes because the aerodrome had been started on the 1st of January 1938, and it came into service in May of 1939. So we used to spend a lot of time watching airplanes taking off and landing. And also, 5 weeks earlier, we had watched Errol Flynn in the Dawn Patrol, Errol Flynn and young David Niven, one of his first starring parts. And what they were doing was they were demonstrating the art of flying, running after each other, stooging, it was often called, and we were watching 2 planes doing that as well, when suddenly everything changed. The one behind had run into the one in front, hit it on the tail, cut off the tail, and we watched as the front one disintegrated and fell into the sea, and the back one dived into the sea. Way across the sands of the East Beach. The tragedy was witnessed by one of the boats. She was out there repairing nets, but the 3 men in the planes were killed as the planes crashed into about 20 feet of water. And the boat that had been out there watching this happening was the Reaper, skipper Jimmy Farquhar, who lived 100 yards away from me. And there's the Reaper in full flow. They dashed over to try and rescue the pilot of the one that had crashed beside them, but they couldn't reach him. 20 feet of water isn't a lot, but it's an awful lot to get down and do something. He was securely strapped into the cockpit. Focus shifted in the harbour because we moved then to the other end of the South Pier to watch the Crescent. Skipper Bob Stewart, another neighbour of mine, Stormy Bob. This was commandeered by the Air Force, and the man in the middle with the soft hat, that's the harbour master, Captain Mackenzie, taking control. And they were sailing across, but they weren't able to do very much more. They had people there jump in the water to try and do something. They tied a rope onto the tail, which was still sticking out of the water at that stage, and tried to hoist it up, but it just broke off. Corporal Webb, who had come out with them, a strong swimmer, he dived, but he still couldn't undo the webbing holding the pilot in place. And the pilot was only cut free when the professional diver came across in his suit and lead boots and copper head and cut the straps and got the body out. This was Corporal Morell from Portsmouth, and he was laid to rest in Lossie Cemetery in a funeral of military ceremony. The two men in the other plane couldn't be found at the time, and they were caught 2 days later in the salmon fishers' nets, and they were brought in to be buried as well. These two of them are buried in the cemetery in Lossie, and one of them, Pilot Officer Allwood from Dover, must have been taken home to be buried in Dover. So Corporal Morell, he was the one flying solo, and he must have been in the rear plane. And in the front plane, Flying Officer Yates, and in the Royal Air Force, he had actually come from Australia. And the stone was erected by his mother, A.M. Yates, from Canberra, Australia. This was the first of the accidents to kill flyers in Lossie. Sadly, there were many others because they were learners and they were having to learn quickly because this was the 1st of August and 5 weeks later the war started. So there was a tremendous rush to train people, and they were not necessarily being trained in the best of aeroplanes. One of them eventually lost a wing, so that's another story.